Hey guys, if there's a tiny blip in my internet, the whole thing just goes. YouTube is not good at reconnecting. Can anyone tell me what time my stream went down? What was like the last thing that happened? Hey, so what was the last thing you heard? Yeah, man, real doofus hours. Man, 2020. Once I saw that outfit in glasses, I just had to try it on. It was ridiculous. Hello again. Well, what's the last thing you remember me saying before it froze? It was at some point during Renfield's rant. Did you hear about Renfield struggling with Dracula in the Mist? You coward! Come out and face fun. That'd be quite good. You could have a king of a bouncy castle. Okay, no, that's the amount of thought I'm putting into that idea. Good. Okay. I thought I was going to win, for I didn't mean him to take any more of her life till I saw his eyes. They burned into me, and my strength became like water. He slipped through it, and when I tried to cling to him, he raised me up and flung me down. There was a red cloud before me, and a noise like thunder, and the mist seemed to steal away under the door. His voice was becoming fainter, and his breath more stertorous. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Van Helsing stood up instinctively. We know the worst now, he said. He is here, and we know his purpose. It may not be too late. Let us be armed, the same as we were the other night, but lose no time. There is not an instant to spare. And you'll notice that under great stress, Van Helsing is somehow managing to speak pretty good English and not talk about the so beautiful Madame Mina. None of the boys takes even a single moment to think, damn, how'd we miss this one? There was no need to put our fear, nay, our conviction into words. We shared them in common. We all hurried and took from our rooms the same things that we had when we entered the Count's house. For those of you who weren't there, like steaks, wild dog roses, onions. No, not onions, garlic. The dog roses thing never really caught on like the garlic did. But that is just as important here. The professor had his ready, and as we met in the corridor, he pointed to them significantly as he said, They never leave me, and they shall not till this unhappy business is over. Be wise also, my friends. It is no common enemy that we deal with. Alas, that dear Madame Mina should suffer. He stopped. His voice was breaking, and I do not know if rage or terror predominated in my own heart. Outside the Harker's door, we paused. Art and Quincy held back, and the latter said, Should we disturb her? We must, said Van Helsing grimly. If the door be locked, I shall break it in. May it not frighten her terribly? It is unusual to break into a lady's room. Van Helsing said solemnly, You are always right, but this is life and death. All chambers are alike to the doctor, and even were they not, they are all as one to me tonight. Friend John, when I turn the handle, if the door does not open, do you put your shoulder down and shove. And you too, my friends. Now! Interrupting the action for just a second, if Quincy Jones is on the side of Dracula, probably a good idea to slow the party down before they open the door, you know? Get them all talking pretty loudly, so Dracula's like, oh shit, there's some guys outside the door. Knock, so Dracula's like, oh shit, there's some guys outside the door. Just saying. Still very ambiguous. He turned the handle as he spoke, but the door did not yield. We threw ourselves against it. With a crash, it burst open, and we almost fell headlong into the room. The professor did actually fall, and I saw him as he gathered himself up from hands and knees. What I saw appalled me. I felt my hair rise like bristles in the back of my neck, and my heart seemed to stand still. The moonlight was so bright that through the thick yellow blind the room was light enough to see. On the bed beside the window lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed and breathing heavily as though in a stupor. Kneeling on the near edge of the bed, facing outwards, was the white-clad figure of his wife. By her side stood a tall, thin man, clad in black. His face was turned from us, but the instant we saw, we all recognized the Count. In every way, even to the scar on his forehead. With his left hand, he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping them away from her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her face down on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled down the man's bare breast, which was shown by his torn open dress. The attitude of the two had a terrible resemblance to a child forcing a kitten's nose into a saucer of milk to compel it to drink. As we burst into the room, the Count turned his face, and the hellish look that I had heard described seemed to leap into it. His eyes flamed red with devilish passion. The great nostrils of the white aquiline nose opened wide and quivered at the edge, and the white sharp teeth behind the full lips of the blood-dripping mouth champed together like those of a wild beast. With a wrench, which threw his victim back upon the bed as though hurled from a height, he turned and sprang at us. But by this time the professor had gained his feet and was holding towards him the envelope which contained the sacred wafer. The Count suddenly stopped, just as poor Lucy had done outside the tomb, and cowered back. Further and further back he cowered as we, lifting our crucifixes, advanced. The moonlight suddenly failed as a great black cloud sailed across the sky, and when the gaslight sprang up under Quincy's match, we saw nothing but a faint vapour. This, as we looked, trailed under the door, which with the recoil from its bursting open had swung back to its old position. Van Helsing, Art, and I moved forward to Mrs. Harker, who by this time had drawn her breath, and with it had given a scream so wild, so ear-piercing, so despairing, that it seems to me now that it will ring in my ears till my dying day. For a few seconds she lay in her helpless attitude in disarray. Her face was ghastly, with a pallor which was accentuated by the blood which smeared her lips and cheeks and chin. From her throat there trickled a thin stream of blood. Her eyes were mad with terror. Then she put before her face her poor crushed hands, which bore on their whiteness the red mark of the Count's terrible grip. And from behind them came a low, desolate wail, which made the terrible scream seem only a quick expression of an endless grief. Van Helsing stepped forward and drew the coverlet gently over her body, whilst Art, after looking at her face for an instant despairingly, ran out of the room. Van Helsing whispered to me, Jonathan is in a stupor such as we know the vampire can produce. We can do nothing with poor Madame Mina for a few moments till she recovers herself. I must wake him. He dipped the end of a towel in cold water and with it began to flick him on the face, his wife all the while holding her face between her hands and sobbing in a way that was heartbreaking to hear. I raised the blind and looked out of the window. There was much moonshine, and as I looked out, I could see Quincy Morris run across the lawn and hide himself in the shadow of a great yew tree. It puzzled me to think why he was doing this, but at the instant I heard Harker's quick exclamation as he woke to partial consciousness, and turned to the bed. On his face, as there might well be, was a look of wild amazement. He seemed dazed for a few seconds, and then full consciousness seemed to burst upon him all at once, and he started up. His wife was roused by the quick movement, and turned to him with her arms stretched out as though to embrace him. Instantly, however, she drew them in again, and putting her elbows together, held her hands before her face and shuddered until the bed beneath her shook. "What in God's name does this mean?" Harker cried out. "Dr. Seward, Dr. Van Helsing, what is it? What has happened? What is wrong? Mean it, dear, what is it? What does that blood mean? My God, has it come to this?" And raising himself to his knees, he beat his hands wildly together. "Good God, help us! Help her! Oh, help her!" With a quick movement, he jumped from bed and began to pull on his clothes, all the man in him awake at the need for instant exertion. "What has happened? Tell me all about it," he cried without pausing. "Dr. Van Helsing, you love Mina, I know. I'll do something to save her. It cannot have gone too far yet. Guard her while I look for him." His wife, through her terror and horror and distress, saw some sure danger to him. Instantly forgetting her own grief, she seized hold of him and cried out, "No, no, Jonathan, you must not leave me. I have suffered enough tonight, God knows, without the dread of his harming you. You must stay with me. Stay with these friends who will watch over you." Her expression became frantic as she spoke, and he yielding to her, she pulled him down sitting on the bedside and clung to him fiercely. Van Helsing and I tried to calm them both. The professor held up his little golden crucifix and said with wonderful calmness, "Do not fear, my dear. We are here, and whilst this is close to you, no foul thing can approach. You are safe for tonight, and we must be calm and take counsel together." Now you think you need to take counsel together. Now. Unbelievable. He grabbed Dracula right on the titty. Well, he could have, it was missed. She shuddered and was silent, holding down her head on her husband's breast. When she raised it, his white nightrobe was stained with blood where her lips had touched, and where the thin open wound in her neck had sent forth drops. The instant she saw it, she drew back with a low wail and whispered, amidst choking sobs, "Unclean, unclean. I must touch him or kiss him no more. Oh, that it should be that it is I who am now his worst enemy, and whom he may have most cause to fear." To this he spoke out resolutely. "Nonsense, Mina, it is a shame to me to hear such a word. I would not hear it of you, and I shall not hear it from you. May God judge me by my deserts, and punish me with more bitter suffering than even this hour, if any act or will of mine, anything ever came between us." He put out his arms and folded her to his breast, and for a while she lay there sobbing. He looked at us over her bowed head, with eyes that blinked damply above his quivering nostrils. His mouth was as set as steel. I'm just going to take a moment here to be like, really glad books nowadays don't talk about nostrils this much. It's peculiar. After a while, her sobs became less frequent and more faint, and then he said to me, speaking with a studied calmness, which I felt tried his nervous power to the utmost, "Now, Dr. Seward, tell me all about it. Too well I know the broad fact. Tell me all that has been." I told him exactly what had happened, and he listened with seeming impassiveness, but his nostrils twitched and his eyes blazed as I told how the ruthless hands of the Count had held his wife in that terrible and horrid position, with her mouth to the open wound in his breast. It interested me, even in that moment, to see that whilst the face of white, set passion worked convulsively over the bowed head, the hands tenderly and lovingly stroked the ruffled hair. Just as I had finished, Quincy and Godalming knocked at the door. They entered in obedience to our summons. Van Helsing looked at me questioningly. I understood him to mean if we were to take advantage of their coming to divert, if possible, the thoughts of the unhappy husband and wife from each other and from themselves. So, on nodding acquiescence to him, he asked them what they had seen or done. To which Lord Godalming answered, I could not see him anywhere in the passage or in any of our rooms. I looked in the study, but though he had been there, he had gone. He had, however. He stopped suddenly, looking at the poor drooping figure on the bed. Van Helsing said gravely, Go on, friend Arthur. We want here no more concealments. Our hope now is in knowing all. Tell freely. Van Helsing is coming across very wise, now that his own shitty plan has backfired. It's like, no, but now is not the time to keep things from each other. Oh, it was me who suggested we keep things from each other? I remember that differently. So Art went on. He had been there. And though it could only have been for a few seconds, he made rare hay of the place. All the manuscript had been burned, and the blue flames were flickering amongst the white ashes. The cylinders of your phonograph, too, were thrown on the fire, and the wax had helped the flames. Here I interrupted. Oh, thank God there's the other copy in the safe. His face lit for a moment, but fell again as he went on. I ran downstairs then, but could see no sign of him. I looked into Renfield's room, but there was no trace there except... Again he paused. Go on, said Harker hoarsely. So he bowed his head and moistening his lips with his tongue, added, except that the poor fellow is dead. Mrs. Harker raised her head. Looking from one to the other of us, she said solemnly, God's will be done. I could not but feel that Art was keeping back something, but as I took it that it was with a purpose, I said nothing. Van Helsing turned to Morris and asked, And you, friend Quincy, have you any to tell? A little, he answered. Maybe much eventually, but at present I can't say. I thought it well to know, if possible, where the Count would go when he left the house. I did not see him, but I saw a bat rise from Renfield's window and flap westward. I expected to see him in some shape go back to Carfax, but he evidently sought some other lair. He will not be back tonight, for the sky is reddening in the east and the dawn is close. We must work tomorrow. He said the latter words through his shut teeth. For a space of perhaps a couple of minutes there was silence, and I could fancy that I could hear the sound of our hearts beating. Then Van Helsing said, placing his hand very tenderly on Mrs. Harker's head, And now, Madame Mina, poor, dear, dear Madame Mina, tell us exactly what happened. God knows that I do not want that you be pained, but it is need that we know all. For now more than ever has all work to be done quick and sharp and in deadly earnest. The day is close to us that we must end all, if it may be so, and now is the chance that we may live and learn. If you ask me, the first thing Van Helsing should say to Mina is, I am incredibly sorry. This is all my fault. You are now in charge. I am now Madam Abraham Van Helsing. You are Dr. Mina Harker. You're the boss, Prof. But the poor dear lady shivered, and I could see the tension of her nerves as she clasped her husband closer to her and bent her head lower and lower still on his breast. Then she raised her head proudly and held out one hand to Van Helsing, who took it in his, and after stooping and kissing it reverently, held it fast. The other hand was locked in that of her husband, who held his other arm thrown around her protectingly. After a pause in which she was evidently ordering her thoughts, she began by sniffling. I took the sleeping draught which you had so kindly given me, but for a long time it did not act. It's the least he can do. I seemed to become more wakeful, and myriads of horrible fancies began to crowd in upon my mind, all of them connected with death, and vampires with blood and pain and trouble. Her husband involuntarily groaned as she turned to him and said lovingly, "Do not fret, dear. You must be brave and strong and help me through the horrible task. If you only knew what an effort it is to me to tell of this fearful thing at all, you would understand how much I need your help." Well, I saw that I must try to help the medicine to its work with my will, if it was to do me any good, so I resolutely set myself to sleep. Sure enough, sleep must soon have come to me, for I remember no more. Jonathan coming in had not waked me, for he lay by my side when next I remember. There was in the room the same thin white mist that I had before noticed. But I forget now, if you know of this, you will find it in my diary, which I shall show you later. I felt the same vague terror which had come to me before, and the same sense of some presence. I turned to wake Jonathan, but found that he slept so soundly that it seemed as if it was he who had taken the sleeping draught and not I. I tried, but I could not wake him. This caused me a great fear, and I looked around, terrified. And then, indeed, my heart sank within me. Beside the bed, as if he had stepped out of the mist, or rather as if the mist had turned into his figure, for it had entirely disappeared, stood a tall, thin man, all in black. I knew him at once from the description of the others. The waxen face, the high aquiline nose, on which the light fell in a thin white line. The parted red lips with the sharp white teeth showing between. And the red eyes that I had seemed to see in the sunset on the windows of St. Mary's Church at Whitby. I knew too the red scar on his forehead where Jonathan had struck him. For an instant my heart stood still, and I would have screamed out, only that I was paralysed. In the pause he spoke in a sort of keen, cutting whisper, pointing as he spoke to Jonathan. He said, "Silence. If you make a sound, I shall take him and dash his brains out before your very eyes." I was appalled and was too bewildered to do or say anything. With a mocking smile, he placed one hand upon my shoulder and, holding me tight, bared my throat with the other, saying as he did so, "First, a little refreshment to reward my exertions. You may as well be quiet. It is not the first time or the second that your veins have appeased my thirst." I was bewildered, and strangely enough, I did not want to hinder him. I suppose it is a part of the horrible curse that such is, when his touch is on his victim. And oh my God, pity me. He placed his reeking lips upon my throat. Her husband groaned again. She clasped his hand harder and looked at him pityingly, as if he were the injured one, and went on. I felt my strength fading away, and I was in a half swoon. How long this horrible thing lasted, I know not, but it seemed that a long time must have passed before he took his foul, awful, sneering mouth away. I saw it drip with fresh blood. The remembrance seemed for a while to overpower her, and she drooped and would have sunk down but for her husband's sustaining arm. With a great effort, she recovered herself and went on. Then he spoke to me mockingly. "And so you, like the others, would play your brains against mine. You would help these men to hunt me and frustrate me in my designs. You know now, and they know in part already, and will know in full before long what it is to cross my path. They should have kept their energies for use closer to home. Whilst they played wits against me who commanded nations and intrigued for them and fought for them hundreds of years before they were born, I was countermining them. And you, their best beloved one, are now to me flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, kin of my kin, my bountiful winepress for a while, and shall be later on my companion and my helper. You shall be avenged in turn, for not one of them but shall minister to your needs. But as yet you are to be punished for what you have done. You have aided in thwarting me. Now you shall come to my call. When my brain says come to you, you shall cross land or sea to do my bidding. And to that end, this. And with that, he pulled open his shirt and with his long, sharp nails opened a vein in his breast. When the blood began to spurt out, he took my hands in one of his, holding them tight, and with the other seized my neck and pressed my mouth to the wound so that I must either suffocate or swallow some of the... Oh my God, what have I done? What have I done to deserve such a fate? I who have tried to walk in meekness and righteousness all my days. God, pity me. Look down on a poor soul in worse than mortal peril, and in mercy pity those to whom she is dear. Then she began to rub her lips as though to cleanse them from pollution. As she was telling her terrible story, the eastern sky began to quicken, and everything became more and more clear. Harker was still and quiet, but over his face, as the awful narrative went on, came a grey look which deepened and deepened in the morning light, till when the first red streak of the coming dawn shot up, the flesh stood darkly out against the whitening hair. We have arranged that one of us is to stay within call of the unhappy pair till we can meet together and arrange about taking action. Of this I am sure. The sun rises today on no more miserable house in all the great round of its daily course. Hi, Jessie. You just caught the end. That was the end of the chapter. One of the more horrific sequences in Dracula, which is a lot more horrifying in the book than it ever is in adaptation, because it's always going to look funny that Jonathan is fast asleep on the bed while Dracula's with his wife. Can't get around it. And of course, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, it's a lot more like a romance, I remember. But like one of those really problematic romances that we had back in the 90s. Yeah. Yeah, there was much more of a, oh, I don't like this. Oh, wait, yes, I do like this, that we all thought was fine back then. Wasn't fine. Isn't fine. I'm really interested to watch the movie again. I haven't seen it in about 10 years. And revisiting the book has been very interesting as well. But yeah, what's striking me the most right now is no one has said they're sorry. Ugh, romance. Dracula's like, you ever suck on a Dracula titty? And Mina's like, no, thank you. Did you make my husband pass out? And he's like, you might like it. You won't know if you don't try. Now, I think it's really funny if you met a vampire to try and bite them, because they would be like, what's going on? I think that's funny. But, yeah. It's kind of like the scene where Lucy's mother dies. It's like, I know, right, to a woman. It's like the dead body of Lucy's mother falling off the bed with her, headbutting her, and Lucy being trapped underneath it. I mean, that's horrifying when I'm reading it out, but I do not know how you would put that on the screen without it being funny. Yeah. It is, and I have no idea what he means by it. It's crazy. But yeah, this is the action-packed, horrifying chapter where Mina and the Count get caught. Although, when I say it like that, it sounds a lot more consensual than it seems to have been. Interesting that she didn't know up until now. Well, I suppose, yeah, no, she couldn't. Lucy didn't either. I think it's sadder, actually, that Lucy died and became a vampire and everything without actually knowing what had happened to her. But yeah, I mean, and of course, venereal disease is pretty much the main subtext of Dracula. So, I mean, Mina, there's something in her blood now from something sexual that happened. It was not consensual in any way. And now she is tainted. Like, she's tainted socially because the person who assaulted her is not her husband. She's tainted spiritually because he's a vampire and he gave her vampire blood. And she's tainted physically because of the vampire blood. So it's very interesting that it's not presented as her fault. It's not presented as any of the guys' fault either, and it absolutely should be. Just like, well, these things happen. We did our best to keep her safe by keeping her ignorant, drugging her, and leaving her alone in a lunatic asylum where there's a guy who we know knows Dracula and calls him master. We did our best, okay? What more could we have done? So it's fairly drastic. It is an extremely drastic way to make sure that women get back on the committee to kill Dracula. But it is interesting that Dracula, he's targeting Mina because he's pissed off at the boys. So he's like, I fucking hate the boys. I'm going to take the girl they like, turn her into a vampire. It's just this, we're going to humiliate their women kind of 15th century warlord mindset. But if he hadn't, like if he'd just left Mina alone, they would have sent her back to Essex. And I mean, can you imagine this lot without Mina stopping Dracula? Or even finding all the boxes? Or even, you know what, can you imagine them getting dressed in the morning? This fucking Quincy Morris has got one leg in a pair of pants, and Arthur Holmwood's got his leg in the other leg of the same pants. They're just... They could never take down Dracula without Mina. Yeah, Mina's absolutely the brains. Yeah. So, if the men hadn't treated her like a sort of mindless property that had to be protected above all costs, then she would not have been attacked by Dracula. And if Dracula had not viewed her as a mindless, precious object without a mind, well, without a brain, then they would not have caught him with her. Oh yeah, definitely. Kim Newman, who is the authority on horror in England, I think. He wrote a book called Anno Dracula, which I lent to John, I think. And it's a book about England after Dracula's invasion completely succeeded. And he just loves it. It's like It's like that post about it's my birthday and every character from every anime and video game comes in for a huge party. It's like that, but a Dracula novel. So every Victorian character you can think about is in there. Oh yeah, no rush to return it, but the second one's the Bloody Red Baron. And there are a bunch of cameos from people that he can't name because they're not out of copyright or they wouldn't let you, but who are obviously like Biggles and his crew, Bertie Wooster, people like that. Yeah, yeah. John, do not return the book to me. Give it to Danny. It is really good fun, and it's great fun trying to spot all of them. I mean, there's one in Anno Dracula that I only got because I watched the movie Pandora's Box from the 1920s, starring Louise Brooks, whose haircut I periodically try and get. And I was like, oh my god, she's a character in Anno Dracula. It's very cool. I like it. But yeah. Basically, I think that's what happened to create, Anno Dracula world. Is that Mina either wasn't on the boy's side or they didn't listen to her enough or something like that. Don't know. But yeah, sorry about the stream going down, and sorry about not including a warning for the very kind of harrowing scene. I don't remember it being that harrowing, but I was a different person when I read it last. So, my apologies for that. Megan Culper. I'll add a content warning or something to the description of the video, I guess. But yeah, thanks so much for being here, guys, and yeah, more Dracula tomorrow. Oh wait, no, D&D tomorrow. It'll depend. We'll see how we go. But yeah, thank you all very much for being here. It's been really cool. And if you can retweet the GoFundMe that I've got on my Twitter timeline, that would be really cool. The American healthcare system is horrific. But yeah, stay safe, wash your hands, don't let the Draculas in, and I will see you tomorrow. Sorry you got here late, Jesse. You can watch the first half and then the rest of this. But yeah, see you tomorrow.